Hi, ladies and gents, and all our followers from UKFT. My name is Martin Jenkins, Project Manager, and today I'm here with Paul Johnson of WT Johnson & Sons to talk us through all the wonderful things that his textile finishing business does. We are doing this as part of UKFT's British Textile Week in association with the Cloth Workers Company and the Campaign for Wool. We're looking to celebrate the great craftsmanship, creativity and innovation in the textile sector. So I'm pleased to introduce Paul, who'll tell us some of the wonderful things that his business does. Paul, great to see you.
Thank you, Martin.
Over to you.
Thanks very much. I suppose we should all be getting used to this Zoom carry-on by now, shouldn't we?
Absolutely.
But it still feels a little bit new to me, but I guess I'm so old school. Yeah, okay, well, it's very nice of you to ask me. Thanks very much. When I talk about textiles, I generally am talking about wool textile manufacturing.
Yes.
And wool blended with all sorts of other things, particularly noble fibres like silk and mohair and vicuna and cashmere. And it tends to be for apparel, not entirely, but certainly that's where we started. But increasingly we're into accessories and some furnishing fabrics and interior furnishings, etc. And I suppose we should say that we've been at this game a long time. The company was founded around about 1910. I always think it's probably a bit earlier than that, but we settled on 1910, digging up the records, which is a very long time ago now. So brother and I, who are still involved in the business, are fourth generation. And clearly, over that time, finishing's changed quite a bit. So it may be a textile audience. Some will know more than others, but finishing is the bit between weaving and making garments or whatever the end use is. And in the very early days, well before I started, the only real job to do was to stabilize woven fabric. So when a tailor made it into a suit, it didn't shrink and skew all over the place and make his job impossible. And that was the size of it, really.
Right.
And the way that you did that was fairly basic. Over the years, it's become what I would now consider to be a crucial part of the manufacturing supply chain, and the effect that we can have on both a fabric's performance and the way that it drapes and handles, so both physical and aesthetic, is really quite amazing. Why has it come so far? A combination of 100+ years of continuous improvement in skills and knowledge, and the advance of more and more sophisticated machinery. You put those two things together and you really can have a significant effect on fabric now. So investing heavily in the most up-to-date equipment and also keeping some of the most valuable older style of machines, and then also knowing how to use them. Those are two crucial things, and not everybody's got both. No. Some people are heavily invested but are lacking in the skill base. Some people have got some skills but have not been able to invest to the degree which is required.
So Paul, your business is based in Huddersfield, and that's quite important in the finishing process, is that right?
Yeah, we think our location is important. There's a few reasons for that. Physical, for one, in that in order to finish well, you need to have a cool and fairly high humidity type of climate. You can't air condition a finishing shed. Right. There's too much steam raising going on, and so therefore you are to some degree reliant on the natural conditions. And when it's very, very dry and very, very hot, it's difficult to finish in the most appropriate manner. So the fact that some people would consider Huddersfield to be cold and miserable is actually quite good for finishing. The second is, again, a physical thing, in that we have a copious supply of what I would call good quality water. Now, when you are finishing wool, the washing process is extremely important. One, because you want to, on a very basic level, get rid of a load of impurities that have been put in the fabric by previous supply chain processes to facilitate, say, spinning and weaving. You want to remove that, so that is just cleaning. But the other thing is that by washing wool in the correct conditions, i.e. the right sort of temperatures with the right sort of lather, you can begin to what we call develop a very soft and luxurious handle. And as you might know from your attempts to wash at home, the better or the softer the water, the better the lather and the more development you can get. Now, fortunately for us around Huddersfield, because of this whole business of Pennine Hills and rainwater coming through the various stratas, two things happen when it reaches the well underneath the mill. One, it's got pH neutral, which is as soft as you can be. And secondly, it's really quite pure in terms of its parts per million. So we have consistent pH, we have consistent purity, and both of those make the washing process far easier to control and far more effective. And that is a big key to why UK fabrics, Yorkshire fabrics, handle the way that they do. And interestingly, we are still on the site that we've always been on, because many, many, many years ago, a long, long way under the mill, we found a water supply, and we have this very, very deep borehole, and we extract the water from the borehole into tanks. So we are not reliant on the local corporations for our water, and we can ensure that that supply is as I've described it, and endless.
Fantastic. And I would imagine there are many, many viewers of our UKFT social media that will have no idea how complex and technical textile finishing is, by the sounds of it.
No, well, it's certainly come on. As I was saying earlier, you know, the development of skills and machinery mean the things that we can create are significant. And, you know, I think, you know, inevitably, because we're manufacturing in the UK, it is very difficult to match price points from elsewhere around the world in terms of fabric. So what are the USPs? Where does that drive you? It drives you into doing fabrics that are short run, that are technically difficult, that require a high level of skill, and where you are dealing with a discerning customer. Now, when you deal with a discerning customer, small changes, small adjustments, small variations in handle and drape can be the difference between making sales or not.
Sure.
And we illustrate this often by making it quite clear to people that you can take a piece of fabric off a loom, bring it to WT Johnson's, give it 2 or 3 different type finishes, and that fabric is a different item.
Wow.
You know, so much so that you might, you know, in a tailor's bunch, for example, give it a different quality number, because the nature of the fabric in terms of the way it performs and its handle has changed so much that they just don't look the same, even though they're off the same loom. Now, that is around using machinery and skill to take a cloth in different directions. So how do we decide? That's very much part and parcel of the relationship that we now have with fabric designers. We have a saying that now, which is, you know, finishing, you should get involved at the beginning, because actually what we like to do is we like to be very clear what the end use is for a fabric, what a designer is trying to achieve, what performance is he trying to achieve, where's the fabric going to end up, and what is the wearer going to be demanding from the fabric. On that basis, then we can choose and work with him to provide the most appropriate
Sure.
finish for that fabric. And I would imagine that the same is true in terms of what yarns you pick, what construction you decide on, what colouring you do, and then don't miss the finishing bit, because that can make a significant difference. And, you know, over the last number of years, we have found that people who understand what finishing can do, particularly at our company, and who work with us to try and work on and select the most appropriate finish for the fabric, generally produce a superior item.
Wow. And I think probably the key message there, Paul, is that the word finishing suggests the processes at the end, but as you say, the importance of being introduced at the early stage of the supply chain will have the better effect at the end. That's an interesting message.
The earlier you incorporate the idea of finishing and the opportunities that finishing provides you into the design process, the more likely you are to get the most appropriate item at the end. And actually, we do take that responsibility very seriously. You know, as you know, over the years, the UK supply chain has cooperated much more closely together than it used to do, sort of, you know, in the 60s, 70s. And we very much feel that we have a responsibility to the rest of the supply chain to make sure that the item's as good as it can be. We talk here about a cloth fulfilling its potential. You know, you think of the massive amount of work that's gone into wool fabric production, never mind the suiting bit at the end, but even the fabric production, where, you know, growers in Australia have got genetic programs to produce the finest, most consistent wool. You know, spinners are working so hard to make sure that it's as uniform as it can be. Designers then spend so much time and care to try and create a wonderful fabric, to create a wonderful garment. The weaver's got to do his bit, and then, you know, lo and behold, you can mess it up at the end, and all of that is sort of wasted. And for me, you know, why wouldn't you want to have it finished in a way that gives you the absolute best chance to make that cloth fulfill its potential and be as good as it can be? And if you don't spend time on the finishing in terms of the way that you're designing the fabric, and or the finisher doesn't do the job to the best of his capability, just think how much of that previous work you're wasting. So, you know, we do take that responsibility quite seriously.
Great to hear. Great. And a great message. And you mentioned in there, Paul, about the importance of skills. So with skills and training, what happens in textile finishing businesses? Where do people go for their skills and training?
I think, you know, when we began, or when I began at the company, there were, as you will know better than anybody, there were a great number of technical textile courses that you could do part-time, and an outside agency, college, tech, whatever, would largely be responsible for giving you technical skills. Now, as the industry has contracted a little bit, and certainly manufacturing for a period went out of fashion, I think that the critical mass required for it to be done that way largely disappeared. So for me, much of the finishing skill is now taught in-house, which is why, you know, apprenticeship programs are so important to companies like ours. And we can use training organisations to develop the bits around the outside, the management, supervisory training, the health and safety idea, you know, other sorts of more generic type training, but the specific finishing bit largely now takes place in-house.
In-house, yeah.
And as a result of that, it's very interesting because, you know, we talk as an industry a lot now in the manufacturing supply chain about how to attract the right sort of candidate. And the truth is, the right sort of candidate, you know, can be quite a broad range of person depending on the job that you require them to do. But for a skilled finishing operative, they tend to learn a great deal about that in company. So what we're looking for, of course, is we're looking for aptitude, we're looking for attitude whereby we want people who want to learn, and largely speaking, you know, particularly in young entrants, outstanding qualifications are a bit of an irrelevance. You know, you may be like me, have met some people who've got outstanding qualifications who practically haven't got no more idea than the man in the moon. And, you know, they won't be coming into manufacturing, they'll be going into something else. But actually, you know, in manufacturing, it is about working with your hands. It is about being creative. It is about teamwork, and it's a different skill set to that which you are learning in the classroom.
Yeah.
And so very much, you know, on a broader, more social scale, if you like, you know, there's a massive role for manufacturing to provide an opportunity and a career path for people who are unsuited to learning in that way. And that largely is what we do for quite a large number of our staff, that we give them the skills that where they need, and they just have to bring their best to work with them every day.
Perfect. That's a great message for a lot. There'll be a lot of people out there that will be looking for that exact type of role going forward. So that's super to hear. Your current role of chairman at the Textile Centre of Excellence gives you that insight into skills and training as well. So no doubt that's been a useful aside to the Johnsons' work.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the started off as a training organisation, but actually now fulfills a role whereby we're trying to look after all sorts of different needs that manufacturers might have. That might be government support, it might be European support, it might be innovation programs. But training is still the core, and you know, we're one of the few organisations left that are prepared to pursue apprenticeship programs specifically for textile technology. And you know, we do try and keep an eye on how a career path can progress. You know, I don't think it would be ideal to have somebody on a basic apprenticeship program, and when that's finished, then everything stops. Yeah. You know, so we have been able to identify progression routes, you know, which can be appropriate to ambition and where you want the student to go. But you know, increasingly outside of degree level, where there are still many textile type courses. I wouldn't say there's too many textile technology courses, which are specifically textile technology at degree level, very few. But underneath degree level, there are very few specific textile courses left. Now, do we have to have them? We could get away without them, but having them is an advantage. You know, and as a finisher, you know, I've already made the case that we tend to do a lot of the training for finishing ourselves, but that still is helpful if we can put our entrants on a program where they learn about wool, where they learn about spinning, where they understand about weaving, where they understand about garment making, and about, you know, some of the testing procedures that go in place. You know, that's only natural. So you know, it's very helpful to have those programs there. Good. And you know, we certainly at the Textile Centre know that we are trying to desperately keep those going for the benefit of those wool manufacturers, those wool supply chain people who are still about. And actually, whilst we're nothing like the size that we used to be in the 80s and maybe even the 90s, those of us that are left, you know, are producing a product, as UKFT know very well, which is in demand all over the world. Absolutely.
Very good. Super. So, Paul, I have one last question for you, if I may. And that's a very, very quick summary of, in your own words, what do British textiles mean to you? What's important to you about British textiles?
Heritage. I mean, people don't like to use the word tradition anymore, but, you know, basically the heritage and tradition bit mean that we've got a background in it. We've got a passion for it. We know where it's come from. We know where it's going. And I think that's helpful to the industry. Innovation, absolutely impossible, even in something as appearingly staid as an old style men's wool suit. You've got to be innovative. You've got to come up with new ways of doing things to make the product extremely clever. I mean, you know, right now we've been working on a natural stretch type product. People think that they know what natural stretch is, but actually the way that natural stretch is universally interpreted by the trade is that it is wool fabric which has a stretch element to it, without having a lycra or another fibre component. Having said that, the way that that is currently achieved by a great many people is through the use of chemicals, which are really quite nasty, the ones that they use, and it would be much more desirable if they weren't there. Our new natural stretch development is very much about producing the levels of comfort through stretch that the industry requires without the use of any chemicals other than soap, water and mechanical stretching properties, which I think in today's world of being environmentally conscious, thinking about sustainability, has to be something that would be beneficial.
Absolutely.
And that's just one example of the type of innovation that all companies need to be thinking about all the time.
Perfect. Paul, I think in there we've covered the history and heritage from when the business started right through to the new innovations that are happening in textile finishing. So thank you very, very much for your time. Anybody who wants to head across to www.ukft.org and follow the hashtag British Textile Week will be able to see more of these types of interviews from prominent people within the industry and look at the trends and tales from the UK textile sector. Thank you very much for your time, Paul. It's been a pleasure talking to you again. We shall catch up soon, I'm sure. For everybody else, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Martin.